Hi everyone, we're live. So welcome to all of you and thank you very much, Amber Swenor, for being my special guest today. We're here for another episode of Seven Figure Consultant Conversations, my interactive podcast spin-off show that we do on LinkedIn Live, on Facebook and on YouTube. Amber, thank you for being here today. It's awesome to have you as my guest. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I love it. Every time we talk, it's a great conversation and I'm excited.
Yay! People who are listening may have come across, we've done a couple of things before, haven't we? But for anyone who hasn't met Amber before, Amber is a real life rock star and a business coach. What a great combination. Amber,
Thanks.
tell us a little bit more about kind of who you are and what you do. Obviously, your brand is Soul Seed. Tell us the whole thing.
Yeah. And it's a great topic that we're talking about today because it's really aligns with where my passion is, which is helping visionary leaders, entrepreneurs step into their leadership in a really authentic way. And so I work with people around the coaching of them as the leader and then also their business strategy. So it's looking at transformation, but it's bridging the both of them because I found that especially for people who are driven to create a business and help people in a way that's really in alignment with your life and what you desire. You're not just looking at, well, how do I make a business in a box over here? That's just not very practical or realistic for people, especially for women. And so that's what I'm passionate about is helping people really define who they are authentically, what they desire, and then build your business so that it creates and allows more of that. And I've built a team where the support team also provides some business strategy and ongoing marketing services. But I love playing in that space of like really working directly in the transformation with the leaders.
Amazing. Yeah. And tell us a little bit before we start about your book that you've written as well, because I've read it. I loved it. I found it so helpful. Tell us about that.
And that was awesome that you read it. So it's called Unleashed, and it's a journey, a guide to support people in your journey to becoming more of your authentic self, personally, and looking at all the ways that applies in career and business. It's really a personal transformation journey, and I teach through my experiences in growing up, all the things that we hear about how we're supposed to be in being the front person in a metal band and also a business coach and leading a business, and all the ways that I struggled with wanting to be my true identity, but having this idea that I had to be corporate Amber over here and then authentic Amber over here. And so I teach about all the ways that that came up as blocks through the experience of business. So I say, if you want to, I say it jokingly, but it's very true. If you want to reveal any of your limiting beliefs, your growth opportunities, any unhealed trauma, start a business.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's really what the book is teaching through that in all the ways that I started to see what it actually was costing me by not allowing my true self to come out and be the leader.
Yeah, I think we can feel this like tension, can't we, when there are sides of ourselves that we're suppressing intentionally. And I know for people watching, that's a huge thing for anyone who's been in corporate, because there's certain ways that you have to present yourself. There's certain things that you should say, certain things that you shouldn't say, emotions that are allowed at work, emotions that are not allowed at work. So we can often, like, if you've had like a corporate background, you can then bring this into your business. Even if you say to yourself, I want a really different business. I don't want to be doing any of those things that I've already done. I don't want to behave in that same way. I want to show up completely different. And yet we so often revert to type because there's a certain safety, isn't there? It's what we know. It's what feels most familiar.
Absolutely. Right. And to what you're saying, we sometimes say we want to do it differently, but we don't always realize it until you get in there and you start the building journey. And this is where I really embrace and say that resistance is opportunity. We don't always know what's out of alignment and where we're being inauthentic until we start to feel those areas of resistance. We start to see blocks that are happening that aren't quite working in the business. And yes, it's such an important conversation because when you step into being your own business, you do get to write the rules. You really do. And a lot of that I think that the people can struggle with in leaving corporate or leaving work working for someone else and stepping into doing our own thing is there are things that we didn't love about that, or maybe how we felt that we were held back. And the beautiful thing is that there are actually a lot of clients, customers, and potential team members out there who are actually waiting for something different also.
Mm.
And so I love to say, well, if anything were possible, what would you create? How would you be? Because anything really is possible. And it's just funny how that works, that these things that we're maybe second guessing, and I know I went through that a lot in my journey, the things I was second guessing, but the reality was that there were actually people out there waiting to join a team with a leader like who I was becoming. Like they saw things differently too.
Yeah.
They wanted the freedom to be more of their true selves also.
That's so powerful. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like this, that we can almost be converging with people sometimes. It's like they're nearly ready for us, we're nearly ready for them. And we have to commit to this journey and actually make sure we're doing the work, which is scary a lot of the time. But before we get too much into that, because I've got a million things I want to ask you, Amber, tell us a bit more about, like, I've alluded to the fact that you're a real life rock star. Tell us a little bit about your band, because it's easy for us to just chuck that in there. And I used to be in bands like 20 years ago. So when I found this out about you, I was like, I love this. But
And I know I love it too, because there's an element of that I think that you shared that it's still a part of you, right? That like energy of being a performer. So from my earliest memories, one of the things I always knew was I want to be a rock star. Like there was something about the performing, the feeling the energy, the freedom that I feel in music. But through my journey, and I think this shows up for a lot of people in any role, any identity we have. Through the journey, there were a lot of, messages I started to pick up around how I was supposed to be as a musician. If you're not going to be hugely successful, as big as Metallica or Beyonce, like, are you just a basement band that's failing? So one of the important threads for me became choosing my joy over judgment in that journey, being a musician. And so 14 years ago, I met my life partner. At the time, he had an ad in a newspaper looking for a singer for a band. I responded to that ad. That's how I met him. We started a band. My brother came into the band. So we've been doing this for 14 years. And years ago, when we would put music online, we would get sometimes more criticism than we got people who liked our music. And I had to choose my joy over judgment to keep going. And it's been a beautiful, awesome journey. And it's paralleled along with my business journey and just merging into me becoming my true identity in all the spaces. So now it's like, I'm Amber, authentic. I help you with business and I'm a musician, but I don't look at them as two separate things anymore.
yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I think there's lots of parallels actually in being a business owner to like being a creative artist of some kind, whether it's music, whether it's writing a book. And there's almost like this battle, isn't there? Like, this is what people want, but this is what I feel called to do. And it's like, how do you know? Because I have quite a few musician friends still. And I think that there's the ones who have like gone with the thing that they felt the pressure to become, and like, people will buy this, therefore I need to be this. But then there's the other ones who are like, I don't care what people want to buy, my soul wants to make this, and I will play this gig even if there's only 5 people there. And I don't know, I think that there can be a whole thing, I've also heard it said about books, like, if you want to write this kind of book, you need to have this kind of marketing spiel for the back, because that's what people want to buy. But then if you're then coming to it being like, but I have something fresh and different. And I think it's the same kind of thing that we can get when we're branding ourselves in our business, isn't it? Like, people expect this. Do I need to be this? And the reason I think it all ties together is that we can feel under quite a lot of pressure if we are constantly trying to become something that is like shaped by other people, that is not in alignment with actually who we are and who we want to be. But I don't know if you relate to that. I feel like there can be that tension between these things as we go through, creative projects, as we go through our careers, as we go through our businesses. And actually,
Totally, absolutely.
it's really difficult, isn't it, to make some of these calls if you haven't figured out what your intuition is telling you, and if you haven't given yourself permission to be yourself and to show up authentically.
Yes, absolutely. To everything that you shared, it's so true, whether you're creative or even in business. And it is important in business that we do understand, well, what's the value of your product or service in the lives of those customers that you
Mm,
serve? But to what you're speaking to, what I found to be really impactful in my journey and countless clients I've supported, I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar for you. I encourage people to start with really defining from the inward, though, what are their non negotiables? What allows you to be the best consultant, artist, leader, whatever it is? What supports you in being that? What are your values? Who are you authentically? Allow that to be the root of it. That's why I renamed my business Soul Seed, because the strategy in the business is born from the seed of the soul of the heart of your
I love
mission and
that.
why your
Yeah.
business exists, and then look at, okay, well, who are the most aligned people? What are the problems they have? Why would they buy this service? Why would they listen to this music? But it's different, right? When we start from what allows me to be the freest, most authentic expression of myself, and then let me look outside and understand what do this audience want and need. Because the other cool thing is, especially for visionaries and creatives, you may be creating a very brand new solution or spin on it or way of doing it.
Mm.
So if you're looking out there like, well, what's everybody buying? And then you're just trying to create something for that. What if what they want to buy is actually something kind of different?
Yeah, that has never been done before, because actually as entrepreneurs, and I know as consultants we can be like, am I really an entrepreneur because I work with corporates? But it's like, if you're out there on your own, you're an entrepreneur. But I think we can feel kind of like a bit like we have to hedge our bets with that a little bit. And it can take time
Mhm.
to I think, be
Yeah.
confident to, people often say to me, oh, like, what's the market research of this? And quite often I'm like, I don't care because I
Mm.
feel it. So I'm going to do it.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a journey. And so for wherever people are at, because I look at back and there were stages in my journey where I was like, okay, I know that I'm good at this and I know that people have a need for this and will buy this. Even though it doesn't feel like my fullest expression, I'm not there yet. I can do this for a while because it gives me the revenue to create some stability, to give me the space to keep exploring what do I want to lean into. And so
Mm,
that's what I encourage people also is being okay with and embracing that this is a journey, because sometimes people get hung up on, well, I need to figure all this out of exactly who I am and who I want to be in the world and what I want my
mm,
life to be like in 5 years, that it holds them back from going out and selling anything. And what I
yeah.
mean is, like, we learn by doing. Sometimes we don't learn what's out of authenticity or not a good fit until you're in the ring, like actually doing the work. And
Yeah,
I hope that
absolutely.
comes through in my journey. I'm going into my 8th year as an entrepreneur. And yes, just like there's so many iterations if I look at that journey about what I said, how I showed up. I mean, there's things that are true. Like there are things that are true all the way through, but there's also a lot that has allowed me to become more of my true self.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a ton of questions to follow up on this whole direction that we're going in. I think the thing I want to ask first, Amber, is like, how can people know if they are being inauthentic? Like, what are some of the signs? Because there might be people watching this who are like,
Mhm.
that's never happened to me. I'm very authentic. Like, what are some of the
Awesome.
signs that maybe these things
Yeah.
aren't in alignment yet in your business?
Yep. A few things. And so this is so timely because I just pulled this from headlines as gave a keynote around this last week. There, it's all over right now. It's like authenticity's always mattered, but now everybody's talking about it. The headlines were about how if you struggle with burnout, that connects back to authenticity. If you
Mm,
struggle with confidence to speak up and say what you want to say, charge the rate you want to charge, this somehow ties back to authenticity. I'll dive into that. And then also, just if you want to create greater joy or feel that you are enjoying your work and life more. So, some ways that people might identify this are getting in tune with your body. So, this is something that I am a strategic thinker, a high achiever. And so, for years, I existed from the head up. And a huge part of my transformation was actually getting present. And this might sound like it's over said, and it has been huge for me and so many clients, just starting to get awareness of how you feel in your body,
mm,
because if you are saying a thing, you're showing up and you're being a certain way, and the more you have a presence to your body, you'll start to notice if you feel tense, if you feel kind of like gross about it. Like you leave an
Yeah.
experience and you feel like I'm just drained, like I just faked it to make it.
Yes.
You'll feel it in your body. You will.
It's so interesting, isn't it? And that really resonates for me because I've talked about this on my podcast before, but like I burnt out of my career 12 years ago. And one of the first things that happened after that is I started going to therapy. And my therapist used to say to me, "How are you feeling?" And I'd be like, "Fine, next question." And she'd be like, "But how are you feeling in your body?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, can we talk about some stuff now? Like, why is this relevant?" And but it's so relevant because actually, I think when we're high achievers, when we're very driven, I went through like the first nearly 30 years of my life with no idea how my body was feeling, and like I let my ambition and my desire to like achieve certain things like be the deciding factor on things. And the thing that happened to me through going through burnout in the way that I did, it was just like I can't do life like this anymore. Because
Mhm.
actually when you start to listen to your body and you realize some of the things that you are being called away from, you actually
Mhm.
like, and I don't know if you relate to this in your business now, because it happens to me all the time actually, that you're like, oh no, I got the feeling, can't do that anymore. And it's a growth thing, isn't it? Because I think so
Mhm.
often we are moving past, and I talk about this a lot in my business. I call it next level self. We are always moving on forward to that next version of ourselves. And actually I get very, very conscious with my clients about mapping this out so that we can understand what we're feeling. But
Mhm.
sometimes, you do an event or you plan something, and then by the time it comes around, you're like, oh, I've grown past that now. Like
Mm.
it's not for me
Mhm.
anymore. And I think
Mhm.
starting to learn to listen to that, it can actually be quite a difficult thing, because I think before I learned how to do that, I was like, I should do this, this, and this, and I would just do them all. But when you start to really listen, you're like, oh, I'm getting this feeling about this. And actually, I think it made sense at the time that I was first thinking about it. But actually, I can see that now I am always moving forward if I'm doing my mindset work, if I'm approaching my business in the right way. And actually, it's not strategic for me anymore. It's not where my energy is. And
Yes.
it's quite a scary thing to
That
actually have to
energy.
start saying no to ourselves.
Yes, but that is the deeper part of authenticity. Too many
Mm,
people, I think, are brushing it off like a buzzword, but it's not. It's truly this deep way. I think you and I both understand this, that I've known it for years. And that's why I'm happy. It's like, okay, now finally you see it in the headlines, they're catching up. The Forbes headline a few weeks ago was why authenticity is now the most important asset your company can possess.
yeah.
Right. But what you're speaking to is that energy. We have to look at what are things costing us. Like if we're
Yes.
forcing ourselves to show up and fake what we want to say, what we want to pitch or sell, or who we work with, it's actually when we start to look at our how we operate, not just in terms of time but in terms of energy.
Mm,
That's a important part of that authenticity. How you asked about, well, how do we know if we're being inauthentic? It's not just where does your time go, but it's what fills your cup and what drains you.
yeah.
Because we've all known maybe there's a client where there's just something that's maybe not in alignment anymore. It doesn't mean anyone's good or bad. It
Mm,
just starts to become where like they could take the same amount of hours as another client, but it could require 80% of your energy.
mm,
And maybe there's something about it where you're not allowing yourself to show up authentically and say what needs to be said to help them. Sometimes it means they're not the right fit, but sometimes it actually means that there's a transformation within us to just like get our, out of our own way and allow ourselves to be more of our true selves, and then just let the chips fall where they may. And what I
mm.
mean is sometimes we're afraid that if we show up a different way with our clients, somehow that's bad, but actually some of them will evolve with you, or that's what they needed for their growth. And some of them,
Yeah.
if they grow out of you, that's okay too. It creates a space for more aligned
Yeah,
people.
exactly. That kind of almost like bless and release, like, this is no longer working for whatever reason. It frees you up to find something that is, but also frees them up to find the thing that is going to be the best fit for them. But I think also sometimes I feel this thing of like drawing in like new clients who like I want, there must be a point at which you're like, it is not possible for us to be any more aligned than we currently are. But I find that like when you
Mm.
really get that clarity and when you're starting to lean into it, and I know that this is true even for consultants who are selling to corporates, you start to attract like such aligned, close, amazing fit opportunities that
Mhm.
it's just like I'm being drawn towards this. It doesn't always have to be like a sort of repelling, sort of pushing things away or closing things down. Sometimes we have to do that, but quite often it can be that sort of sense of being drawn forward into something that you're like, this is next level. This is so exciting.
Yes. Yes, and to get to that point, it does require that we allow our truer selves to be seen and to represent ourselves in our brand and what we're saying and how we show up in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was something that you said there as well a few minutes ago, Amber, about kind of we can get to this place where our feelings are almost, they're giving us clues that maybe we're not picking up on. And I think that's really interesting
Mhm.
because quite often if a client is like, I really don't like this person online, I really don't like what they say or what they do, I'm like, ooh, that's interesting, because I think we get that kind of jealous, envious, angry response when
Mm.
someone is pushing our buttons because they are doing the thing that we secretly wish that we were doing and we're not doing it.
Mm.
It's almost that kind of, we're
Yeah.
out of integrity with our calling because part of you wants to do that. And I often think, oh, this is going to be fun to tease this out, because there's
Yeah.
sometimes like an unacknowledged desire there, like, you know, maybe someone is like promoting their book and it's really pushing someone's buttons, and it's like, you want to write a book, don't you? And I wonder if you know that you want to do it yet. But I don't know, what would you say about that? Do you think that kind of, do you relate to that kind of
Absolutely,
jealous
because
feeling?
otherwise, why would it be showing up if there wasn't something there around
Mm,
it? There's some information. If something's pushing your buttons, there's something to be learned from it. There's
mm,
there's either it's information that there's something in store there that you desire, or it could be that they have complete different views. But if anything, it'll help you then recognize what you do believe in, what you do want to speak out about. So
yeah,
I 100% agree with you that, and I'm a very positive person. So I hope people hearing this can also recognize leaning into and recognizing what pushes your buttons doesn't mean that you're going to the negative. What it is it's
yeah,
supporting you in your journey to uncover more of your truth and authenticity and learn how to listen to your voice of intuition and I love what you're sharing because it's so important to have a guide, a mentor in this journey that you what you shared is holding the space to get curious around that, not judging
mm,
it, but just saying, okay, that's interesting. Why is that present? And that's been huge for me in my journey as well. Like I can now see it in a moment. Like again, it's the body awareness. 7, 8 years ago, I don't even know if I even knew what that was, right? And
yeah,
now, and it's been a journey, but now I'm so aware. If there's a glitch of a resistance, of a judgment, of a jealousy, of a whatever, I can feel it. I'm aware of it. I'm curious about it, and I can like often shift it or go talk with my mentor about it. It's like I'm aware of it, and so now I can do something with it,
yeah.
and
It's
we can
almost like
move
a,
through it more quickly, which gives you your energy
exactly.
back.
That's the thing. It's like a springboard, isn't it? It's like a kind of little thing being like, ping, there's something you need to deal with here. And I think starting to do the mindset work and starting to like sit with these things and be like, okay, what is actually going on? So far we've talked about body awareness. We've talked about getting curious with some of these things that come up.
Mm.
Like, I'd be really interested, Amber, to hear your take on this. Like, what do you think is the sort of practical steps that we can start to put into our everyday working life and non-working life, in order to start embedding this as we go forward?
Mm. So there's a few things. So we talked a little bit about values and truthfully though, like revisiting not just what words are, but what does that mean to you, right? What does that, if you value wellness, okay, what does that define that? Does that look like every day creating space for a family meal, a 20-minute walk you do by yourself? Whatever those values are, defining what it looks like as a behavior for yourself in your life, in your business,
Mm,
because this will support you in creating a business that it allows you to be more authentic to what matters to you.
yeah,
Because otherwise, it can be so overwhelming when we're invited to so many things. There's a bunch of social media platforms, there's a lot of potential angles you could go with clients you want to work with. but I find that bedrock of, defining your unique values, because we're all crafted differently.
Mm.
So that's a big one. I'm curious your take on that, actually.
Yeah, no, I think I really agree. So one of the things that's really shifted in my business in the last 12 to 18 months is starting to just create a radically different routine for myself. And like,
Mm,
so for me, what that has looked like is I don't work mornings anymore. I only work the afternoons. So I typically start 1 or 2 in the afternoon and I'm finished by 5, sometimes 5:30. So that is quite like a short slot for
mhm.
working. And it also helps because a lot of my clients are in the US and Canada. And so actually they're asleep. So like
Yeah.
I can do what I like. They don't need me. If they're voxing me at that time, they should be asleep. So I don't usually vox back because I'm like, we're not having a conversation about this at 3 a.m. your time. Like go back to sleep.
Mhm.
We'll talk about it when you're
Mhm.
properly awake. But like it's meant that just things like walking my dog for like an hour, sometimes 2 hours a day. I live next to a national park. And actually, one of the things, even in the last week, that I've just been like, it's kind of in the morning, and I'm just like, oh, I want to do this walk today. Oh, I want to drive out to there today and do this. And like for me, I think that's quite a powerful thing because like sometimes I've really struggled with making decisions when it's doing stuff independently by myself. And because
Mm.
I'm a wife, I've got kids, there's so many situations where like I can sort of hide behind them and be like, well, they want to do that and they want to eat that. And you know, so then when I'm by myself and it's just me and the dog, and she's looking at me like, where are we going today? It can actually be quite difficult to make that decision because I'm like, well, I don't know, because I'm allowed to do whatever I like, and that doesn't always happen. So I
Mm.
think a really important thing for me, sort of intuitively, is just when I first get that thing of like, I want to go there, I noticed in myself, I was like, oh, but I could go there or I could go here. And then suddenly I'm all overwhelmed and I'm like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. And so it's, does that make any sense? It's like the gift of freedom, but it can
Yeah.
actually be quite overwhelming. And I was like, I know this has been showing up in my business over the last 8 years. That kind of, there's a
Mm.
blank slate, you can do anything. Oh my
Mm.
gosh, what do I do with
Yes.
that?
This is beautiful. And in fact, you opened the door to where I was going next with, around these like practical recommendations. And what I hear you speaking into is, are all the tools that we can learn to better understand ourselves, our decision making.
Mm,
There's a few that I love. So, do you know human design?
yeah.
So that helps you understand your energy and your decision making authority, because we're all different. So it's a free it's a free online, by the way. If anyone watching or wants it, you can look it up. Human design. It's one of the tools that we use with our clients, in addition to a few other tools. So, but I like that because we each make decisions differently. But the more that we understand about what supports us, we can just be aware of when we're going into default, right? Or if we have blocks sometimes, or I have clients who sometimes struggle with perfectionism, but now they're able to just self recognize, okay,
Mm,
actually, I've been kind of spinning around this thing for weeks and I need to let it be 80% good enough and just start it, like get
yeah.
myself out of. And so that self awareness journey.
Mm,
So a few of the tools I love: human design, Enneagram, Clifton
mm,
Strengths Finder, and DISC. I actually use all four of those. I know there's a bunch of different great tools out there,
mm,
but I find that's an interesting combination that can help us with more of, just understanding ourselves a bit better.
mm.
And and then maybe when those moments of like doubt come up about there's so much possibility, well, you'll learn your unique strengths and skills. And I think you're also speaking into intuition, which I think is huge, to learn how you connect with your intuition and how we each like find our place of trust with that. To
Yeah,
trust
definitely.
ourselves.
Well, because I think I definitely received the message through my career, like you can't be trusted to write an email because I had bosses who would always want to like reword everything that I'd written or just change a little bit. So it leaves you with that feeling of like, I better not do this by myself because I always say the wrong thing. That was huge at the beginning of my business because I was like, oh, I've got to have all these conversations and I'm not allowed to say anything. And I just got to the point where I was like, okay, from now on, I'm allowed to say everything. And I was just like, do you know what? I do have quite a unique style. I am quite direct. And that's kind of what makes me good at being a coach because I name the thing. that is
Yes.
going on. And sometimes that's difficult to, like, it's difficult to hear, but sometimes it's difficult to do for me as the coach. But I think it was all,
Mhm.
if I'd have never started sort of addressing the resistance I was feeling over wording my own emails, I never would have got to the point where I understood how that was impacting on the work that I do with my clients. So I do think that there's a huge thing, isn't it? It's like you kind of get like it's like a little woodpecker like tapping away, and it's like, oh, there's a whole thing behind here. But you deal with the surface issue
Yes.
first and the way that it's presenting. And we don't always know the bigger picture of where these things are taking. But if you trust that you're on a journey and you're being shown the
Mhm.
things that you need to be shown in order to progress,
Yeah.
I'm just finding more and more, it's like, don't worry too much about the specifics of like where everything it has to lead, because we want to be strategic, but sometimes you can't be strategic about everything. Some things just happen. And a
Yeah.
lot of the things that have just happened to me, that I didn't plan or prepare for, they've been so much bigger and cooler than the thing that I thought would happen.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a key there is embracing a few of these mindsets we're talking about, which is what if you trusted that there is no right or wrong,
Mm.
right? Some people, and it helps them to lean in to let it be messy. I know that alone can just make people be like, oh, but like,
Ah.
what if you just let it be
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Mm.
And trusting that we learn by doing, that we can't connect the dots looking forward, we only connect them looking back.
Yeah.
And we have to just give ourselves permission though to bust out of this idea that there is a right or wrong way to do it,
Mm.
and give ourselves the permission to play in the
Yeah.
creation.
Oh, that's so important, sort of adding that back in. Because
Mhm.
I do think that's a huge thing, actually. It's kind of like when I've done big up leveling in my business quite often, and this, it spans back the last 8 years of my business, but it was absolutely going on for me. During big things like when I got married, when I had my first kid, even when I had my second kid, and you're like, I should really know what I'm doing right now, but I really don't have a clue what's going on. But I think during some of those like stressor moments, you can feel a bit like, I feel like I'm doing it wrong. I feel like I should know what to do. But I
Mhm.
found it really liberating to just be like, I don't know what to do. And that's okay, because how would I know?
Yes.
Because I've never been in this situation before.
Yep.
And
And
I
I found that even like the people we're looking up to, they still feel that sometimes. Like
mm,
I had this moment the last few years where I was like, oh wait, I'm the one that people are like looking up to. Like I'm serving my clients. And even sometimes I'll have that thought, pop up. But as we build our confidence, become more of our authentic selves, as we learn more of our leadership style, we
mm,
we have more of an ability to flow through that or recognize it and call it for what it is and move through it more quickly. It doesn't mean
yeah,
that it doesn't still pop up. At least that's my experience. The imposter syndrome thing, the self-doubt thing. I'll make a post and I'll still self-doubt, like, ooh, should I have said that? And it's from all the years of doing the work, stepping in. You have tools in your toolkit. You've seen the evidence of the impact your work has made. So I'll go back to all those things. And then it helps me to keep moving. And I think we just can get better at trusting our intuition.
mm,
It's come up as a theme in this conversation. It's like sometimes you can't logically explain a thing. And
mm,
I've learned to be better at trusting it and not needing to make a whole explanation for it.
yeah,
And until we get to practice with that and then see how something actually better unfolds from it, then we become more confident with how to trust that again and again. And so I think those are
mm,
really important steps early in the journey for people when they don't have all that proof yet for themselves. It's like you have
yeah.
to trust it and the proof will happen. And then you get more confident to do it again and again.
Yeah, definitely. Because I do think it's a situation, and like I know I've felt like this at times. It's like when you're like, oh gosh, I don't know what to do. Someone has to tell me what to do. I think the best
Mhm.
thing for you in that situation, rather than have someone to always tell you exactly what to think, exactly what to say, is to start turning it inward on yourself a little bit and being like, well, what do you think you should do? Because it's very often not the case that you're like, I can't think of anything to do. Usually, if you feel like, oh gosh, I'm out of my depth, I don't know, I've never dealt with this before, it's like, okay, so what is your intuition telling you that you
Yeah.
should be doing? And it's not that you don't know, it's that you are not allowing that voice to
Yeah.
be heard, or you're not speaking it out, or you're not taking action.
Totally agree. Absolutely. Yeah. And then and trusting yourself enough to listen to that, to know that, each of us, so like each of us as the consultant, as a business owner, there is no right or wrong way. It's the way that that you're picking up on is the path that's meant for you.
Yeah, definitely. And
Mm.
yeah, this is like linking really nicely, because as soon as you said that, the thing that came up for me is that quite often I think we step away from authenticity because we fear being seen, and we fear that if we show up as our true self, we will push people away. Whereas
Mm.
I actually think that the more we fake it, the more we like push away connection.
Yes, yes. So I'm thinking through for myself. There's times that I stepped into being more of my true self, and it felt scary, but I can't say that I've ever looked back or ever regretted that, because it always leads you down the path to something more and more that's in alignment. But I
Mm,
can look at times when I did things that were out of alignment for the true me. And I personally don't really like live with regret. I think everything's a learning opportunity, or we can grow in some way from every
mm,
experience. But I'm able to see that the times when I said something away or I did it away, like I took someone else's advice, even if there was sort of a kernel of like doubt within me, or I felt like I was meant to do it a different way.
mm.
And now I'm able to see when I went against that and how it didn't quite play out a way that I felt great about. It's
Yeah.
like you can never go wrong trusting yourself. You really
Mm.
can't. But you
Well,
can
yeah,
kind of
because
go wrong with some regret when you look back and you're like, ooh, I kind of had that intuition, but I deferred my power to the expert, and then it didn't.
yeah, it didn't go the way that you wanted to. And I think sometimes there is, even if someone is giving you good advice, if you're like, I'm not feeling this and I don't think I can move forward
Mhm.
into that with integrity, it's like that energy mismatch is going to mean that like this thing is not going to work. So even if on paper that's the best thing for you, you need to find the thing that you're like, I am so excited to do this. It's going to
Yes.
be the best thing ever. Because if it's anything less than that, it's not going to have that resonance that I think
Mhm.
we need to have. Like we need to be people, and this is one of the things that I am working on with some of my clients. We need to be people who feel good about what we're doing. We feel good about how we're showing up, because
Absolutely. Oh
it
my gosh.
gets more and more
Yes.
tiring the more successful you get to fake it at such a high level. And I think we can end up with quite, like it causes harm to your body to have to fake certain things. And I think
Mhm.
if you have this terrible fear that you have to be a certain way, otherwise no one will take you seriously, or clients won't like it, or you'll lose this or you'll lose that. I think that there needs to be a point where you just say, do you know what? Like, if people don't like this about me, like I'm going to be attracting in the people who really get this and who it really resonates for. And I think it's almost that which is the really important thing with all of this.
Right, because it's if we try to be all things to everyone, we can be sort of a watered down, sort of subpar version of a thing, or we can be powerfully potent and really be a magnet for the people and places and projects that are an aligned ideal fit.
Mm,
And to what you're saying, we fear somehow that we are leaving people out or doing them harm. But would you rather be sort of ho hum and forgettable, or would you rather make a great impact with an intimate few? Right.
mm,
And then from that place, in fact, your impact can grow exponentially. But we just need to make the choice to be more of that authentic alignment, magnet versus kind of being forgettable because we're playing it safe.
yeah. I'd be really interested to know, Amber, like, do you think there are ways which people think they're being authentic when actually it's like a car crash that people can't look away from? Like
Oh.
how do we how what are some of the ways that people sometimes do authenticity, but actually it's like, no, not like that?
This is a really, yeah, really, really good.
I'm just totally putting you on the spot with all of
No,
these.
no, no. I love this. I'm like, okay, I'm like scanning my mind about all the. Well, sometimes we say, well, I'm waking up every day and I'm saying my affirmations and I'm putting it out there to the universe, but still like the results aren't happening. And the issue is that there's something embedded in your belief or in your strategy. So I teach something that I call the alignment framework. And it's rooted in the concept that the law of polarity says that for the potential for one thing, there's the potential for the opposite. So for the potential for life, there's a potential for death. For the potential to be authentic, there's the potential to be inauthentic. for abundance, potential for lack, right? Two ends of the spectrum. And there's three components that can help any of us recognize when we're being authentic or not. If you break down what's your mindset around this thing, what are you saying in your head, how do you feel about it, and then what are you actually doing about it? So it's what you think, how you feel, what you do. And so a lot of times I see people in some way saying, well, I say I believe in myself, but they actually, like, there's a belief where their energy is really in lack. And it can be nuanced and a bit deep, but with a lot of my clients, the way it shows up is they're having conversations with clients, but they don't actually believe in like their worth to receive that money for what they're proposing. And so they're like, Amber, what's going on? I'm having these conversations, but then they just aren't buying. And when we get deep, dig into it, often we'll reveal some of their beliefs around how they're feeling, like in the call. They're feeling fear about, well, this person can't afford it. And like they're putting out that energy that they aren't quite aware of. And so it's putting them on the lack end of the spectrum rather than abundance. And so I'm kind of going deeper with authenticity, right? Like, but that is the thing that prevents people from really authentically like helping their clients. If you're already kind of prejudging if they're going to say yes or no, or what they're thinking about you, if you're putting out that energy, they're going to pick that back up.
And often they will receive that as like, she doesn't like me. She doesn't think I'm good enough. And like, it's like, whoa,
really
see what grenade you just chucked into the sales conversation just by having that front and center for yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
So I have two questions, and I'm not sure if they're the same question. We'll see. But the thing I was thinking is like, what can we do when we're really conscious of that fear? But also, there's this whole thing, isn't there, about like in coaching and in business in general, sometimes we can have our spotlight so firmly fixed on ourselves. We feel like all these things matter so much. So like, what do we do in terms of like turning our spotlight onto our clients who we want to serve?
I love that.
Like, how do we cope with authenticity for ourselves as a person without then being like, oh my gosh, everything that I say, think, do, wear, am matters so much, when actually the focus kind of needs to be on them for us to do our best work.
Yeah. My view is that when you're in your authenticity, it just gives you the freedom to serve more, to be able to shine the light in your clients, to lift them up, to, celebrate them, even in your marketing, in your community, to show up and do more, to not be afraid to offer to lend a hand if you see something else that they might need help with. So the reason that I believe we should go on this authenticity journey is simply because of what it makes available in terms of the impact we can make. I gained so much energy when I had to stop being in fear about the stories I was running through my head with every conversation, and I would replay them for hours and days afterward, and I would cry and feel embarrassed and like go back and forth on all this way I was self-doubting. It still comes up sometimes, but not nearly the way it used to. So when you embody that authenticity, like I went through all that too, like, okay, I'm putting myself on the cover of a book, but this is meant to be about the people who will read it. But for me, I got to the place of saying, well, if I'm free enough to just be like, well, this is who I am and this is what I do, and it allows me to help you more because I'm free of fear about what anyone's thinking, it actually is really beautiful how it allows me to just show up and do more service for my clients. And that's the reason to do this work for ourselves.
Well, I love what you said there about it frees up energy to focus on other things, because I think when we're in these things and we're not doing the work, which sometimes we can be like, I'm doing the work, it's like, you're not doing the work because look at the fruit. But like when you are really sort of churned up over your own stuff, I think sometimes it takes your focus off where it should be. And so it's a sign that it's gone too far, and it's starting to become something which is not helping you move forward. Like the right kind of authenticity should free you up to be able to fly forwards. This is a massive thing I talk about with next level self. Like sometimes it does feel like you're just doing one like climb at a time, and it's like every step is hard work, but like really, when you've found the clarity and you're showing up in that way that you should be, because the results just start to flow, and it's like you can't even stop them if you would have tried.
I love that. And so then to your question was also around, well, how do we like do this in the world?
Mm,
So I just relate it to marketing because that's a space that I'm in also. There's a way in which you can teach from or authentically share your experience, but there's a difference if you're still processing or you're in it versus if you're sharing to then relate back to your client or
mm,
audience and then teach from it.
yeah,
And so that can be really helpful to say, well, if you're sharing something, what's the reason or how does it still deliver value? How does it help make
yeah.
an authentic connection? So maybe it doesn't feel like self-promotion all the time, but how is it actually a learning lesson in some way that helps people see that you might be the consultant or the speaker or the coach or the whatever for them?
Yeah, it's that relevancy, isn't it? That we're not just sharing for our own sake. We're not just being like, here's a soapbox for me to broadcast everything that I'm doing in therapy at the moment. It's
Yeah.
more like, what thing do I know, can I share that will spark off that same process for my clients so that they start being like, oh, the clarity of understanding this, they can see their own journey in the things that we're sharing. So I guess from that point of view, it's not that we're being really guarded and we only share like one or two things, but it's like we're always thinking like, what's the benefit, what do they need to hear, rather than what do I feel like I want to say.
Yes, absolutely. It's a beautiful way to allow ourselves to put that focus on service again and saying, okay, what's the pulse of what's going on in my community? What am I noticing are the problems, the pain points, what they're resonating with, this audience of people that I serve? What are you noticing? And then how can you speak into that? And sometimes if we skip the piece, and it depends on exactly what your work is, but especially anyone that does anything transformational, or if you're working, around with humans or teams, it's important that they can get to know you a bit authentically as the human. Because sometimes if
Mm,
we're only talking about you have this problem and I have the solution, people don't get to make that authentic connection to feel
yeah,
safe with you, working with you,
yeah,
regardless of who's hiring you, whether it's the president of a company, the HR director, marketing director, there's still a person working with a person. So
mm,
they still need to, in some way, feel some trust with you at a human level.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Like, what would you say, Amber, in terms of like, does does authenticity always feel safe and like the right thing? Have you ever had times where you've like
Oh,
been authentic and then been like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or like, oh,
oh,
that was the right thing to say, but gosh, I feel vulnerable now.
there's a lot of times that it has not felt safe for me and for a lot of clients. And again, embracing it's a journey. And I think this is where allowing ourselves to take a step, even if it's a so-called small step. I don't really believe in any small steps, right? Like sometimes people might look at, I don't know if you experience this, Jessica, but I experience people will be like, yeah, but you're already there. You've built $1 million business. You have all these team members, da, 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 da. And really helping people see and remember, but I also, I had to take that first step, right? Like I
Mm,
walked that journey of being the first in my family, first generation to graduate high school. I walked that journey of leaving a secure job with the unknown. I walked that journey of landing the first client. And so, I tested that, like singing that song in a new way, or posing that new way on stage. And so we just have to allow ourselves to take steps,
mm.
and it might feel scary, but like if it feels an ounce truer than not true. So I look at imposter
Yeah,
syndrome
I
as
love
like
that.
one of my clients said the imposter syndrome is always on her shoulder, but she just keeps it in the rearview mirror and she's the one driving.
Yes.
And so what feels an ounce truer, and just take a step into that,
Mm,
because it is normal. There's a whole bunch of brain science on it, right? It's normal that when we step into a new thing, everything in our being that's made to keep us in survival wants to revert to, well, you've been staying alive the way you were back there. So our
yeah.
brain doesn't want us to change.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that is really powerful because, like, I don't know, me and my husband were actually laughing about this the other day. Like, these days, it's really clear that it was a really good decision to set up my business because it's going well. It's become a successful business, and it's so kind of soul aligned for me. But
Mm,
like 7 or 8 years ago, I didn't know if it was like 5 years ago, I didn't know if it was a good idea. And like, I think it's that thing, isn't it, that comes with like time spent just committing to like what you think is your calling. Like if
Mhm.
it's not the right thing, then it will lead you to the thing that is. So actually nothing is wasted. But like we
Yes.
don't get the assurance up front, do we? Like if I'd have been like, you know, struck by lightning and been like, I must start a business, it will be the thing that completes my life. Like,
Mm.
yes, that would have been great. But like instead it was like, oh, I've got an idea. I think I might do this.
Yes. In my book, I say, like, it wouldn't be coming to you if there wasn't an aspect of it that's for you.
Mm,
So I think it's completely normal to struggle with feeling inauthentic in your journey to becoming more authentic, but it's a bunch of little steps that build on top of each other. And only when
yeah,
we look back over the scope of a year or years can we really see the cumulative effect. Like, I've
yeah,
known for years I was meant to write a book, but even a year ago this time, I know that I was on calls, crying, melting down with my editor, who was also my coach. Like every now and then, that imposter syndrome would still pop up where I was rethinking it. But when I quieted my
mm,
activated state of being, and when I would get meditative or go in my body, the truth was still there that the work I do makes an impact. I have all these stories of people who've benefited. I feel the call to write the book. My call toward authenticity and that this is meant for me is bigger than the imposter. So keep going. So I just want to validate that I think it's normal to still doubt it
yeah.
and that it doesn't need to hold you back from still
That's
moving forward.
perfect actually,
And I
because
can
I
say a year later, now that's out there in the world, I'm like so freaking happy that I did it. It's
yeah,
just
but
so
you don't
freeing.
get that assurance, do you, at the time? And that is perfect, Amber, because literally I was going to ask you, like, what can you do if you get the feeling that like it's authentic, but it also feels like you're about to jump off a cliff and it feels a bit too much.
Get
I think,
support, right?
yeah,
Like get the right
exactly.
community and people that help validate for you to trust yourself and keep walking your journey. They're not telling you what to do, but they're helping hold the space for you to keep moving in what
Yes.
you already know to be true.
Oh, I love it. We're nearly out of time. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Amber. I'd love to ask you one final thing, which is like, what do you think is the most overarching, overriding, most important thing if you are on this quest? Like our title for today is living and leading into deeper authenticity.
Mm.
What advice would you give to someone who's like, yep, I want to do that. You've persuaded me. How do I do that?
Ooh. The most present thing is take the next step that just feels most that you're most called toward. Just take the next step. It's so simple, but it is so true.
Yeah,
Take
I
that next
feel that.
step
I feel that. I'm smiling because I'm like, yes, sometimes that is such a scary thing to
and
do, isn't it? But like, it
yes,
is the thing to do.
it is. Yes, and that might feel called toward a new offering, a client, a program, a coach, a this or that. And it before you explain it all away in your head, if your soul is a yes on a thing, move toward it. Give yourself the momentum to trust your soul to move toward it before your brain comes in and messes it all up. So
Yes.
just like act from that soul place. Put that into momentum.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you, Amber. It's been brilliant having you as my guest today. Thank you for everything that you've shared. And we've been talking about your book all the way through. Where can people go if they would like to check it out?
Soul-seed.com, SOUL-seed.com. That'll take you to events I offer, coaching programs, to get my book. You can also get the book online at any retailer, Amazon, directly from me, all the places.
Oh, I love it. Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone who's joined us live for this. If you're watching the replay, then I hope you have enjoyed it too. I'll be back again soon with another episode of my podcast spin-off show, Seven Figure Consultant Conversations, here on LinkedIn Live. And that's the end.